Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month. Slows full terms at mintmobile.com.
Whoa. Landing an account this big will totally change my landscaping business. It's going to mean hiring more guys and more equipment and new trucks for the new guys to drive the new equipment in. I don't know if I'm ready.
You can do this, and Ford Pro FinSimple can help. Our experts are ready to make growing pains less painful for your business with flexible financing solutions that meet the needs of your business today when you need them. Get started at fordpro.com/financing.
You're listening to Well Now, Slate's podcast on health and wellness. I'm Maya Feller.
And I'm Kavita Patel. Maya, for decades, we have been trying to find just the right ability to intervene with the chronic disease obesity through pharmacologic interventions. There have been many drugs that I have used over years in practice, starting with even what has become kind of negatively corresponded to in the public setting, like fen-phen, but has actually been used in medical settings, that drugs like Qsymia and others, which are still very valid, along with really severe interventions like bariatric surgery. But for many, in 2021, those efforts reached a milestone when the Food and Drug Administration approved semaglutide injection in the form of WeGovy, specifically indicated for weight loss. This was done for adults with obesity or classified as overweight with at least one weight-related condition, such as high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, or high cholesterol. And there's no question that since then, the impact of this approval and approval of other similar drugs have just gone on to change the landscape of obesity medicine. A few years later, just recently, drugs such as Wegovy and Mounjaro are now used in treating at least 13% of American adults. And there are some that have not reported the use, but are obtaining the drugs from other countries. That's how popular this drug is. By 2030, it is estimated that 30 million people in the United States, that's 9% of the entire population of adults, will be using a GLP-1 drug. Today, we're about to dive deeper into the world of GLP-1 medications as they continue to drastically change the medical world, as well as filling up your social media feeds. So if you've ever caught yourself, Maya, scrolling and wondering, what really is the deal with Ozempic, Wegovy, or Mounjaro, which I have myself because while I've prescribed these for patients, I've often wondered, how did there become so much hype around these drugs? They work, but you really have to use them in the right setting. We're hoping that today we can break down the science behind the drugs, their mechanisms of action, and also talk about the risks and side effects. So Maya, have you been scrolling and seen yourself finding things like Ozempic neck or Wegovy face or any of these other things that I know I've been seeing and patients have been bringing to me, but have been distinct and different than that conversation about obesity that we had on the previous pod?
Yeah, I definitely have had patients come to me asking a whole host of questions about these non-surgical treatments for weight loss. I mean, to say that it's hot is an understatement. It's like hot, hot, hot with fire emoji on top of that. I mean, here's the other thing, Kavita, though. I have to acknowledge that this is a hard conversation. Some folks are going to be like, I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to hear it. And I know that there are a lot of critics, right? And I agree, right? I think some of this popularity around this class of medications, again, it centers weight loss at any cost. I mean, I'm seeing also too this whole return to skinny, skinny, skinny as being in, and being in this very slender body, and thinness as this thing that we should all aspire to. It's a challenging moment. So I have to tell you, Kavita, I don't know how I feel about it myself. I will say that I've had patients who have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and they have used this class of medications. And we've seen real improvement in their inflammatory markers and their liver function tests. And I also have patients who have multiple comorbidities like high triglycerides, hypertension, elevated blood sugars. And we're seeing improvement in all of these areas while on these GLP-1 drugs. I also have to say, the other side is that I've got some patients who are like, I'm just trying to get cute for the summer, or I want to get right for this dress, and I want to be in a thinner body. And they too are on the medications. Interestingly enough, regardless of why people are on them, myself and the dietitians on my team were all having the same questions, right? And the same conversations with patients. How do we make sure that you're eating enough high quality protein, because there's this very rapid weight loss and most people are losing significant amounts of lean body mass? How do we make sure that you're getting sufficient amounts of fiber? How do we make sure that you're staying well hydrated? And how do we make sure that you're actually getting the vitamins and minerals that you're missing, because the side effects of the drug are significantly decreased hunger along with early satiety? So nutrition becomes super prescriptive and it has to be well planned out. Otherwise, folks are malnourished and their cells are really missing out on the nutrients that they need as they're in the midst of active weight loss. I also have to say that for many people with history of eating disorder or who have real disordered eating patterns, this is, I want to say, it's a shit show. It's a total disaster. Yeah. There's a lot to balance. Kavita, what are some of your concerns that you have about the GLP-1 drugs?
I mean, I think my concerns echo some of the ones you have, but I will tell you there's no question the evidence is irrefutable. We have a trial, it's called the SELECT trial, 17,000 patients monitored over at least 4 to 5 years, some longer, depending on when they entered the trial. And this is like incredibly rigorous, double-blinded, randomized controlled trial to try to understand these drugs and their negative as well as positive, like side effects and consequences. And we do see side effects. Those are 100% true. But I will say that the benefits we see are just undeniable, complete reversal. I've had patients come off of insulin, patients come off of what was near dialysis. And so it's hard not to see the overwhelming mountain of evidence for the right patients. I think that's the critical piece. It's not the person scrolling in social and wants to lose 5 pounds. But I do think that between social media and I think the cynicism in general with like trusting doctors such as myself, that things are pretty challenging to making sure patients are getting the right medications. There was a recent announcement by the company Hims and Hers that's making waves with incredible caveats. And Maya, I think that there's a lot of perception like, okay, for just a couple $100 a month, if your insurance won't pay for this, you too can get this drug. But Maya, what are your thoughts on ways to make it easy to get these drugs?
Kavita, I am very concerned about the shortages that we're currently experiencing and the unscrupulous compounding pharmacies, right? That are just popping up. So pharmacies, these compounding pharmacies can custom make medicines, and they're not the medicines that are made by the manufacturer. When they are unscrupulous, then it goes unchecked. And I really think that these drugs have to be used under clinical supervision with qualified physicians and dietitians, and not just some telehealth pop-up where anyone can call and get a prescription and there's no follow-up. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's
right. And compounding pharmacies, to be clear, are useful for some things. But in these cases, in fact, the FDA actually put out a warning on exactly this issue because of the lack of ability. The FDA does not watch over what is done inside of a compounding pharmacy, nor does it have authority over what the product is. So you might see something and they say that it's one thing, WeGovy, but if it's from a pharmacy that is not directly kind of seen by the manufacturer, you don't know what you're getting.
That's exactly right. And I have to tell you, I've had patients who have come to me and said, oh, someone who's got elevated lipids and they also have blood sugars that are not well managed or very, very high. And they're like, I can't get the drug. Should I go compound? And I'm like, slow down. Like, I understand the desire to get at it in the moment, but it's like we have to really scrutinize a little bit more before we just dive into every and anything that's on the market.
That's right.
You know, Kavita, there's so much more that we could really discuss on this topic, which is why I'm really excited about our next guest. She's a researcher, clinician, and one of the global experts on this topic, Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford. Stay tuned.
Whether you're off to the pool, hiking, or traveling this summer, you're bringing your microbiome with you too. The 38 trillion bacteria that live in and on you, especially your gut, are essential to whole body health. Seed's DS-01 Daily Synbiotic is a 24-strain probiotic and prebiotic that benefits your gut, skin, and heart health in just 2 capsules a day. Probiotics and prebiotics work best when used consistently, like other routine health habits, like getting in your daily walk or eating enough fruits and veggies. You have to stay consistent to see benefits. If you're looking to start or maintain your whole body health journey, Seed is a great product to try. Support your gut this summer with Seed's DS-01 Daily Synbiotic. Go to seed.com/wellnow and use code 25wellnow to get 25% off your first month. That's 25% off your first month of Seed's DS-01 Daily Synbiotic at seed.com/wellnow. Code 25wellnow.
You know that drinking water is important to stay healthy and hydrated. Having safe, clean water is the last thing that you want to worry about. But unfortunately, according to extensive research by the Environmental Working Group, 3 out of 4 homes in America have harmful contaminants in its water. That's why you've got to check out AquaTrue. AquaTrue purifiers use a 4-stage reverse osmosis purification process, and their countertop purifiers work with no installation or plumbing. And they have purifiers that fit every type of home, from installation-free countertop purifiers to higher capacity under-sink options. They even have a Wi-Fi connected purifier and mineral boost options. That's one reason why I really enjoy my countertop AquaTrue purifier. It's so easy to use, and it really simplifies the process of drinking water. AquaTrue comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and even makes a great gift. Today, my listeners receive 20% off any AquaTrue purifier. Just go to aquatrue.com. That's AQUATRU.com and enter code WELLNOW at checkout. That's 20% off any AquaTrue water purifier when you go to aquatrue.com and use promo code WELLNOW. Welcome back. You're listening to Well Now. I'm Maya Feller.
And I'm Kavita Patel. Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford is an obesity medicine physician, internist, and pediatrician. She is an associate professor of medicine and pediatrics at Harvard Medical School and one of the most highly cited scientists in the field of obesity. Today, we'll be diving into her journey, her groundbreaking research, and her insights on obesity medicine, particularly her thoughts on the class of drugs, widely known as GLP-1 or glucagon-like peptide-1 drugs. Dr. Fatima, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here.
Well, great. Well, we like to kick off every interview with thinking about how you define wellness. And it can be however you want to answer that question. But if you wouldn't mind maybe offering any context in the conversation we're having right now in the country about obesity as a disease and how you think about wellness in that context.
Absolutely. Kavita, thank you so much. I really think about wellness as someone being able to live with their bodies in the way that makes them feel their best self. I think that when we think about obesity, we have to recognize that this is a disease that you wear. People judge people for how they look. We make judgments and we make decisions about what we think someone's value and worth is. And I think that this is unfortunate. I think that we have to recognize that we have to live with ourselves from within. And we have to recognize that people should feel great about who they are. I don't define someone based upon the number on the scale. I actually had this debate with a fellow physician, a patient of mine this week, who had achieved a certain number on the scale. And I actually was not necessarily happy with some of the other key numbers or metrics that she had gotten back. So while she had lost a certain amount of weight, we still had some other key metrics that were not ideal. Particularly, her cholesterol was very elevated. And so we went on to have this debate, which she stated she didn't want to address her very, very elevated cholesterol. And so we had a conundrum because I saw her wellness as not being addressed. She saw her weight as being addressed. And I don't just treat the weight. And so I felt as though I was not addressing the wellness that was her, that being full in herself. But we had some incongruence in our definition. And I think that in order to really be at one with oneself, we have to define wellness by the wholeness of oneself. And that really looks at the whole person, not just the number on the scale.
Dr. Fatima, that was such a fantastic example. And it really speaks to so much of what I think is going on in the moment. So can you explain to us in really standard terms that everyone can understand, what are GLP drugs and how do they work in the body to regulate blood sugar and promote weight loss?
So Maya, in order for me to explain that, I have to really explain obesity. They really go hand in hand. So I'm going to have to explain one to explain the other. So what a lot of people are unaware of is that our brain is the primary organ that regulates our weight. And so there are two primary pathways that regulate weight within our body. There is a pathway called the POMC or anorexigenic pathway. It means it decreases food intake and storage of an organ we call adipose. Adipose means fat. And that pathway, the POMC pathway, is exactly what we call the pro-opiomelanocortin pathway. So that pathway defends leanness, okay? So that's one pathway of the brain. Now, the other pathway of our brain is our orexigenic pathway, the opposite of anorexigenic pathway. Orexigenic defends body weight or promotes eating, right? It promotes storage of adipose or fat. That's the opposite of anorexigenic. That's our AGRP or agouti-related peptide pathway, okay? So that's the pathway that tells us to eat more and store more. Now, why did I have to explain that? To explain the GLP-1s? Because that's exactly how the GLP-1s work. They upregulate that anorexigenic pathway that tells us to eat less and store less, and they downregulate or inhibit or block that orexigenic or AGRP pathway. Now, the second question you asked me was regard to blood sugar, right? Like they were first invented. GLP-1s came on the market not for weight regulation. They initially came on the market for the treatment of diabetes. So they promote insulin release in our body. So there's an organ in our body called the pancreas, and it stimulates the release of a hormone called insulin. When insulin goes up, it shifts down glucose, which is sugar in our body, and it keeps it steady. And that's how these medications work. So they promote the anorexigenic pathway, they decrease the orexigenic pathway, and they release insulin in our body. But there's another thing I didn't tell you it does. Actually, there are a few other things I didn't tell you it does. Slows movement through the GI tract. Okay? I want you guys to think about that. When things move slowly through the GI tract, you feel full longer, right? So you go and you eat breakfast, and then maybe you forgot about lunch, not because you were trying actively to forget about lunch, but you were still full from breakfast. And so then you get to dinner, you're like, wait a minute, did I eat lunch today? No, I didn't have anything. Not because you were actively trying to skip lunch, but things were still moving through the GI tract very slowly, right? So it promotes satiety, that sense of fullness, okay? So things are moving slowly through the GI tract. Another things that GLP-1s do is they promote thermogenesis. burning more just by sitting. We're sitting here. You guys don't know that, but we're not moving it around. We're sitting in place, okay? How much you're burning just by sitting here, okay? So there are a lot of the things that the GLP-1s can do. There's a lot that we're discovering about GLP-1s, but these are the mechanisms of actions of these GLP-1 receptor agonists. But there's another thing I want you guys to know, because a lot of people think we're just giving these medications to people. What I want you guys to all know is that GLP-1 lives inside of all of our bodies. All of us have GLP in us. Those of us that naturally are leaner just happen to have more of it. Your bodies just do more of that than someone else's body. It doesn't mean that you're better. It just means that your body just happens to have more of that on board, okay? So I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about that.
No, that's super helpful. I think especially building on the fact that this is the GLP-1 class of drugs is not necessarily doing something that's so foreign to what is a naturally occurring process, but just reminders that every single person is different. And yet we have these commonalities over pancreas, kind of what our organs do. So in light of that, Dr. Fatima, how then can we kind of think about this class of drugs and just your thoughts on your approach to when you prescribe them for patients?
Yeah, this is really interesting. So first, one of the things I always let my patients know that, particularly if I'm going to prescribe these, is I let them know that when we're looking at this dysfunction in this pathway in individuals, is that I'm not sure if this is the dysfunction that's in their body. So when I'm giving or prescribing this, I say, look, this may be the dysfunction, and so this may work for you, but I don't believe this to be the quote unquote magic bullet for everyone. These medications work in about 80 to 85% of individuals, but notice I didn't say 100%. 80 to 85% is not 100%. So if this is what works for you, if you are in that 80 to 85% of individuals that this does work, this is working with your body's own GLP-1 pathway to help stimulate what's already there to work even better. And for those of us that don't have as much on board, it's helping to better regulate those brain pathways that aren't working quite as well. But if it works, we do need to use these long term, because as soon as we pull it back, it's no longer there. It's no longer working effectively. Our bodies will resume whatever it was doing prior to that administration.
That, and would you be comfortable speaking to side effects? You already mentioned just kind of what happens in the body naturally, as well as potentially with the slowing of the GI tract, et cetera. Do you have that conversation when you also prescribe the drug?
Absolutely. So let's go over the key side effects that we see with these medications. And I always will say it exactly like this to my patient, although this isn't quite what the package insert would say, but this is how I like to explain it to patients. I always say, and I'm going to quote myself directly because why not? I tell them the number 1, the number 2, the number 3 side effect is nausea. This obviously can't be the same thing, but the reason why I say that is because up to 44% of patients will experience nausea. And so that's pretty sizable. And that's why I say it in the way that I do. Now, this is particularly important as we're titrating up the dose of these medications, particularly if we're looking at a medication like semaglutide. And I'm using fancy words, so I will give you guys more generic names for these medications. Ozempic, which is the trade name we use for when we're treating patients with diabetes, or WeGovy, which is when we use the trade name for treating patients with obesity. Typically, if you were looking at the package insert for this, it tells you to keep a patient on these doses for at least 1 month before going to the next dose. Now, notice I said at least 1 month, or it says to go up at a month. I do something that may be different from what others will do, is that I will listen to the patient. And let me tell you why I listen to the patient. Because the patient is the most important person in the room at any given time. Yes, I'm the doctor. Yes, I have a lot of degrees. And yes, I'm on a lot of shows and a lot of people know me. But I am not the most important person in the room ever when I'm with the patient. And it's because the patient knows their body. If the patient is telling me they have significant nausea at 0.25 milligrams, and we're at that month level, it does not make sense for me to increase their dose to 0.5. Why? Because if I double their dose, what do you think will happen?
They won't be able to tolerate it.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Let's just think logically. I am not within my best interest of doubling their dose if they're experiencing nausea at the lowest dose. Maybe they need more time at that dose. Maybe they need 2 more months. Maybe they need 5 more months. It doesn't matter. The patient is the most important voice in the room. All right. So nausea is the number 1, number 2, number 3 side effect. I said really doesn't say that, but that's my nomenclature. Nausea, obviously vomiting can accompany nausea, but not necessarily. Constipation, however, is a very common side effect. Why? We talked about that delay in movement through the GI tract. So constipation is very, very common with these medications. Diarrhea can accompany it. And you might be like, well, Dr. Stanford, how are constipation and diarrhea going together? We're going to get a little funky here, but let's just go there. Sometimes things are moving through the GI tract and things don't fully evacuate the GI tract. So there may be some stool up there and some water and things moving around the stool, but not everything is completely coming out of the GI tract. So if there may be some loose material coming around the stool that's still impacted in the GI tract. So constipation can definitely happen. Some people can have some headaches and dizziness. This can also be derived from the fact that patients may not be eating as much. Remember, this promotes that anorexigenic pathway. People sometimes are not eating, but sometimes they're also not drinking. You ask them, have they had anything to drink? Yeah, I don't know if I had anything to drink today at all. Like no water, nothing at all. Because not only you're not have a desire to eat, you don't also have a desire to drink. Now, fluids are very important. What happens if you go into the hospital? What do we immediately start you on? Fluids. We always hook you up to fluids. Even if you don't know this, you can watch any TV show, even if they're doing it wrong and not starting the IV correctly, they always start you on fluids, okay? Right? Just watch any medical drama. They do it all wrong, but they will start you on fluids. They are right about that. So fluids are really important. You might notice some fatigue. Fatigue can happen. This is, I would say, a little bit less common, but a lot of this is due to not eating as much, not having as much energy. This can happen. These are kind of really the more common side effects that we can see from these medicines. Now, these medicines are absolute contraindications to use, meaning we do not prescribe these medications in a few groups of individuals. If you are pregnant, absolute contraindication. Absolutely never at all prescribing these medications in patients who are pregnant. Number 2, if you have a history of medullary thyroid cancer, no, absolutely not. Multiple endocrine neoplasia type 2, absolutely not. These are 3 groups we would never prescribe. There is an abundance of caution if you have a history of pancreatitis, just because it can exacerbate or cause pancreatitis. And so just want to be aware of those. So those are kind of the key things that we're thinking about.
That makes a lot of sense. It's so interesting to hear you talk this through, because when I'm working with folks, these are the exact side effects that they're talking about. You know, I do have a question. How do you think about navigating this kind of in the long term? Because you're saying, okay, that once you come off the medication, right, you're going to kind of go back to what was before. So what does it look like for long-term navigation, and how do you in your practice think about what that quote unquote ideal dose is for the individual?
Well, in the long term, I think about this like I think about any chronic disease, right? So if this is the medication the patient uses, we're going to use this indefinitely. So I think about that. And so I make sure the patient's aware of that. If this works, we will use this indefinitely. So that's the first answer. And then for the dose that's appropriate, it's finding the right dose for the right patient. So that may be 0.25 for one person, and it may be 2.4 for another person. It's high variability for patients. And then in reality, for those of us that have been doing this for 20 plus years, they may not just be on this. They may be, most of my patients are on combination therapy. What do I mean by that? So, if I want to look at the true winners, and I'm putting that in air quotes, Most of my patients are on combination therapy. And by that, I mean they have undergone bariatric surgery. They're working with psychologists. They're working with dietitians. They're on a GLP-1 plus phentermine plus topiramate plus metformin. And they're getting to really high degrees of total body weight loss, where we're looking at 40, 50, and even 60+% total body weight loss. So it depends on what they need. And, I've been thinking a lot about that movie Ratatouille. If you guys remember that movie
Yes.
in the past where, you had this little, I guess was he supposed to be a rat? I don't know if you think
I think so.
He sure was. He was an actual rat in the kitchen. That's correct.
he was a rat making these dishes and with, like little ingredients. And it was supposed to be a chef in, I think, Paris, right? He's supposed to be making things. And I find myself thinking like this when I'm working with patients about finding the right ingredients for the right patient, right? Everyone needs a little different thing. Maybe this patient needs a little sprinkle of this GLP-1. Maybe this person just needs a little surgery. And maybe this person just needs to work with a dietitian like Maya. And maybe this person needs to work with a psychologist. And it's about finding the right recipe for the right patient at the right time, right? And it's unique to that person. And it's not blaming this person for needing this or this person for needing that or this person for needing this. Everyone has the right recipe. And it's about, the right recipe for the right person. And the greater the number of years, the greater the number of patients. I've probably worked with over 10,000 patients by this point. I see that that's really what it's all about. It's about finding the right recipe for the right patient at the right time. And it's really like that.
That's what I'd call personalized medicine right there.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to take a break here. And when we come back, we'll hear more from Dr. Fatima on obesity medicine and GLP-1 drugs.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 up front for 3 months plus taxes and fees. Promo rate for new customers for limited time. Unlimited more than 40 gigabytes per month slows. Full terms at mintmobile.com.
This episode is brought to you by La Quinta by Wyndham. Your work can take you all over the place, like Texas. You've never been, but it's going to be great because you're staying at La Quinta by Wyndham. Their free Bright Side breakfast will give you energy for the day ahead. And after, you can unwind using their free high-speed Wi-Fi. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine. Book your stay today at lq.com.
In 1978, gay people in California faced a dire threat.
Proposition 6, the Briggs Initiative.
The teaching profession is riddled with the homosexual element.
John Briggs is going to fire every gay and lesbian school teacher in the state of California.
I'm Christina Cauterucci. This season on Slow Burn, we'll explore how a nationwide backlash against gays and lesbians led to a massive showdown in California.
This was tens of thousands of pissed off gay guys and lesbians roaring down Market Street.
With so much at stake, young people became activists.
We've got to fight back. We can't let this happen in California.
And activists became leaders.
My name is Harvey Milk, and I'm here to recruit you.
Slow Burn, Season 9, Gays Against Briggs. Listen to the whole season now, wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Well Now from Slate. I'm Kavita Patel.
And I'm Maya Feller. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. Fatima about GLP-1 drugs. So, Dr. Fatima, I know that GLP-1 drugs can be expensive, even with insurance. I've heard these stories from people that I'm working with. And there are so many barriers for patients who might benefit from these medications. Can you tell me what some of those barriers are? And are there any initiatives that are going to make them more affordable and accessible?
I have to take a deep breath because this is a major pain point in the work that I do. In some ways, I feel privileged to be here in Massachusetts, where we have some of the best coverage with our payers, or particularly in our insurers, with our Massachusetts-based insurers. But for my patients that do not live on one of these Massachusetts-based plans, it is a nightmare for all of them. The out-of-pocket cost for those that are not on those plans, even with coverage, can be in excess of $500 plus a month, even with coverage. And that's really not sustainable or affordable for most persons. I had a patient that has really limited resources, what we consider low socioeconomic position, who was so desperate to just try it, that she was like, well, please just send it through. I just want to try. We didn't know that the copay for this patient was $1,100 once it got sent through.
Did you say $1,100?
Exactly. She went ahead and got it for that month, unbeknownst to me, until she sent me a patient gateway message to say, I just wanted to see. Of course, 1 month of the medication isn't going to give us any level of efficacy. She just wanted to know what it was like. So for that month, she got to experience what the medication was like, but that's not something we can sustain and she can sustain. And so she asked me the question that anyone would want to ask, or probably anyone listening wants to know. So then what do I do now? And this is where my heart fell through the bottom of my body. I don't know. Because the reality is that these medications are very costly and they will remain on patent for years to come. Now, I can tell you that what our hope is that there's so many players coming through the space, meaning other companies that are developing agents, that when you get a crowded group of medications coming through potentially, that this will drop the price, right? So if you have 5 other agents potentially, there's a lot of medications that are eventually coming through that, eventually this will drive the price down, like competitors in the space. But this is all a hope, right? It's like, the hope is that, that this will drive down the price. But do we really know that? All of those companies are going to want to recoup their research and development also. So do we really know that that will drive down the price? Also, we know that the first generation GLP-1, which was our once daily liraglutide or Saxenda, is supposed to come off patent this year. That was a lower efficacy medication on average, accounting for about 6.5% total body weight loss, which is much below the semaglutides, which is the Ozempic WeGovy's of the world, which accounts for about 15% total body weight loss. But it is still something. And so that will possibly help at least open up the GLP-1 market to those that are underinsured or uninsured. But the reality is that these are outside of the scope of a lot of individuals. We are seeing individual markets, particularly Medicaid in different states like Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, opening this up. You guys can hear that I live in downtown Boston. Welcome to my life.
Sounds like New York City. So, Dr. Fatima, I have to say, it's not shocking or surprising. Listen, there are ambulances in urban centers.
Oh, I live in the middle of it all. So Saxenda. So hopefully when that comes off patent, then that'll open up one of the GLP-1 agonists to the greater population. Of course, that's a once daily injection. Also, I'm not sure what the price point will be for orforglipron. For those of you who are unaware, there was a study that was on an oral GLP-1 agonist that was published in the New England Journal by Sean Wharton and colleagues. And that is supposed to have the similar level of efficacy to semaglutide. That was published by Eli Lilly and Sean Wharton. And what I think will be really useful if they are able to drop the price point for that is that that's an oral, which will have less of an issue with access and the availability that we've had, the shortages that we've had, particularly with the injectable agents that have really caused us a lot of angst, even amongst the group that does have the insurance and coverage for these medications.
Yeah, the issue of accessibility is, I mean, it's so much in the forefront, I'm sure, of not just the conversations you have with patients, but, you know, it's amazing to also see this proliferation of telehealth services. Like, I mean, there's been a lot in the press, even very recently, about other ways to access the drugs. So I'm glad you clarified kind of at least an outlook. I share the same outlook that, like, yes, in theory, there'll be more competitors and that this will hopefully kind of bring prices down. But we have not actually seen that with other classes of drugs unless the generics are introduced with similar efficacy profiles, which we don't have here. So it's helpful, maybe, if you don't mind, Dr. Fatima, just coming back to this topic of overall kind of in the conversations you're having with your patients and the lectures you're giving, around like what to make out of the lack of long-term data. This comes up with any, I would call it like innovative drug. Now we have, as you mentioned,
we have a lot of long-term data.
Liraglutide. We have other data to help with this, but talk about how when other clinicians say, but Dr. Fatima, we don't have long-term studies for the SELECT trial, for example, and side effects. What do we make out of that?
Yeah, so I disagree with this. I mean, when we look at GLP-1s as a class, and I think we have to look at this as a class, right? We have over 20 years of data for GLP-1s. And when we pull the meta-analyses for the GLP-1s, we do have 20 years of data showing a reduction in fatal and non-fatal strokes, fatal and non-fatal heart attacks, all-cause mortality, favorable kidney composite outcomes. We just really have overall, not just from the SELECT or SURMOUNT trials, which are, of course, we're looking at 5+ year data just from semaglutide alone, or, of course, we're going to see tirzepatide results coming out. But I mean, we're looking at the GLP-1 class as a whole. We do have a lot of data that is really quite compelling, that I think really gives us the information about that class. Now, once we start getting into the GIP, which is, of course, that glucose insulinotropic polypeptide, that when we start adding that piece onto the puzzle, we do have a lot less data on that piece that's been added into when we start getting into dual agonism. And then, of course, when we start getting into triple agonism, when we start adding on the glucagon receptor agonism, when we start seeing retatrutide and those types of agents on the market, we won't have long-term data specifically about those newly added components. But for the GLP-1 class as a whole, we have a tremendous amount of data. And I feel very confident about the GLP-1 as a class and the class effect and our ability to extrapolate that over as a class across the population and what that means for our patients and the long-term outcomes.
So with the long-term data, I do have a question, because I've seen it raised in press articles around safety concerns. Are there any that you ever think of?
No, not anything that jumps out to me that I'm really concerned about for my patients, right? So I always think about, particularly when I'm prescribing agents, would I use this in my family members? And the reason why I say that is because I think of my patients as my family. And particularly since most of them have been with me for 10+ years, because when we think about obesity, it is a chronic, relapsing, remitting disease. And my patients don't go anywhere because this disease isn't one that I solve with a GLP-1, isn't one I solve with bariatric surgery, isn't one that I solve with, lifestyle modification through dietary interventions or anything. It's one that they remain with me over the long haul. And so are these agents ones that I would be hesitant to give my family, i.e. my family of patients or my actual family? And so there isn't anything in the safety profile that tells me, you know what, I wouldn't give this to my family. And there isn't anything there that raises an alarm of that sort. Actually, it tells me the opposite. It shows me that there's actually cardioprotection, right? This reduction even in these most recent data of major adverse coronary events. But the data showed us that in the before in our meta-analyses data prior to the most recent data coming out of Novo. Before we saw the most recent data showing our obstructive sleep apnea data or our kidney data, we saw this data before. It's just coming out in this most recent bout coming out of Novo, but we saw this data before. So none of this is surprising data. It's just coming out in this nice, neat package from one company.
So with that, Dr. Fatima, is there any advice that you'd give to patients who are thinking about considering GLP-1 drugs? And are there any specific questions you think that they should ask their doctor or take into consideration before starting treatment?
Yeah, there are a few things I think. I see there are some people that are reticent to consider the agents due to shame. I don't think I should go on these medications. I should be able to do this on my own. Okay, so let's consider this thought process. So I want you to, if this is where you are, think and apply that same question to your blood pressure. You should be able to then make your blood pressure go down on its own. Or, in the same vein, maybe you should make your cholesterol go down on its own. We have this thought process with regards to excess weight or adiposity that we should be able to do this on our own. And yes, we should make dietary modifications. But if you've done those things and you still struggle, then why are you trying to force yourself to not utilize tools that can assist you to being your best self? That's just my question. And I want you to pose that question to yourself. No judgment, just I want you to think that through. Okay, so then when you're working through this with your physician or other advanced practice provider, I want you to think about whether or not this is a tool that you could utilize and whether this is something that is affordable and sustainable. The affordability piece, we talked about a patient of mine that was able to get just 1 month of this agent. That is not sustainable. I don't want you to try to get something that is cost prohibitive that you won't be able to sustain. There are other agents that are outside of the GLP-1 class that are FDA approved that you might need to work with your provider with in terms of considering one of those agents that would be better suited for you. And so be very thoughtful and careful about that. I would warn against using something that comes out of your hair salon or a medical spa. All right?
Yes, please. Maybe you could say that one really loud and a dozen times.
Let me repeat that. I think your hair salon is great for getting your hair done. They're really great for getting your hair done. Medical spas, maybe you're great for getting a massage. Really great for that. But not for getting your medications. Do we have that? Is that clear? Yes. We're going to go to our doctors, our medical doctors. Okay, yes. Our nurse practitioners and our physician's assistants, people that are working in the profession to actually get medications that are prescribed to treat obesity. That's great. Isn't that lovely? That's what I'd like to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I do. I hear you, Dr. Fatima. It is the landscape out there at the moment is feeling in some places like the wild, wild west. And I can tell you that I did have someone come to me and say, oh, I found this wonderful med spa in New York City. And I said, well, who's the prescribing physician? And who's going to monitor your labs? And who's going to talk to you about the other parts of your health? Because they, of course, had multiple comorbidities. And they said, no one. And so I really think underscoring what you just said, like, yeah, if you're going in for this treatment, you've got to work with a qualified healthcare provider in a true health institution. So I do appreciate that. Before we close out, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us?
I really just think we need to treat this disease like we do any other disease. I think that we should treat it with the dignity, kindness, respect that we do others. We should take it seriously. We shouldn't judge the people. We shouldn't also judge the persons that treat the disease. But I also want us to take it seriously in terms of where the care is being administered. I have seen adverse outcomes from people seeking care on South Beach. And I really think that this isn't about just looking cute on South Beach or on the Vineyard or wherever people choose to go. This is about the overall health. And I talked about a patient that was having this debate about their lab parameters. I take those seriously. I don't care that we've lost 20% of your total body weight. If your LDL is 191, I think we should treat that. And I will continuously believe that that's important. It's not just about the number on the scale. Okay. So we can achieve that. And if we are failing at those other numbers, then I'm failing you as a physician if I'm not able to help achieve health in the metabolic realm. So that's what we should be looking for, not just how cute we look in our bikinis during the summer. If that's your target and if that's just your goal, then I want you to think about changing your thought process.
Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford is an obesity medicine physician, internist, and pediatrician. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Fatima.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a great time with both of you.
That's our show this week. Well Now is produced by Vic Whitley-Berry. Ben Richmond is Slate's Senior Director of Podcast Operations. Alicia Montgomery is Vice President of Audio.
We'd love to hear from you. Email us at wellnow@slate.com. If you want to support this show, please consider becoming a Slate Plus member. You'll get to listen to this show ad-free, as well as hear bonus material from some of your other favorite Slate podcasts, like Slow Burn and Amicus. You'll also have full access to all articles on Slate's website. And be sure to tune in next Wednesday as we tackle another part of the wellness industry. I'm Kavita Patel.
And I'm Maya Feller. Thanks for listening.